If you have an interest in horses and love learning more about horses, the horse industry, teaching, or even managing your own horse business, then you're in the right place. We would love you to join us on our mission, which is to improve the lives of horses around the world through the education of riders, handlers, and trainers. So get comfortable, listen in, and enjoy.
This is another of our popular Listener's Choice interviews, which we're playing over the weekend. We've chosen the most popular interviews for you to select the Listener's Choice winner. If you're not sure how the Listener's Choice competition works, have a look at horsechats.com/choice for the rules and the leaderboard. Today's guest is Fran Griffen. Fran's been with us earlier on episode 189, so if you'd like to go back there, have a bit of a listen to that if you haven't heard it before you come back to this one. And her subject today is 10 tips for working with fear around horses. Now, just something from Fran's previous episode that I'd like to talk about. She said in that episode, if you love what you're doing, you're never going to work a day in your life. And I think she carries this through to all the work with horses. How are you today, Fran?
I'm well, thank you, Glenys.
Good. Fran, looking forward to talking to you about the 10 tips for working with fear around horses. Now, what's the first tip for us?
Okay, the first one is just to acknowledge your own strengths and your accomplishments. Mm-hmm. Before we have a ride or before we go out to the horses or really in everyday life, just taking stock of what you already know, what you've already done, what are your strengths and where you're coming from and what sort of accomplishments have you had in the past. Because as we start to get fearful around horses or fearful of success or even fearful of failing, we start to worry about just that and we don't acknowledge what we've done beforehand. So being able to acknowledge what you've done before, your strengths and things you have accomplished in your past, and even something as simple as last week, something that you accomplished last week, can really set you up as a sounding board before you go out to your horse, because we tend to forget all the good things and only focus on what's not going our way.
Yeah. So you're really coming in with a positive mindset, aren't you?
That's right.
Yeah, and you as the coach are instilling that. If they do come in and they're a bit fearful, a bit negative, and they think everything's going to go wrong, you're setting them up to win before you even go anywhere near the horse.
That's right, and it can be even really useful to sit down just for a moment and play a positive video in your mind, mm-hmm. something, a good ride, or something that you've already felt good about, and just play that in your mind before you even start.
Yep. So even just that positive visualisation, that's great.
Yeah.
Okay, Fran, what's the next one that you've got for us?
So the next tip I would give you is when you do feel that fear, is to acknowledge it, mm-hmm. because there's sometimes the advice of to push that fear down, to say it's not happening, to try to ignore it. And this doesn't serve us well, so you need to acknowledge the fear. I like to ask riders where they're feeling it, where they feel the fear. Sometimes it will be in their stomach, in their chest, in their throat. Some riders will experience shortness of breath. Others will be tingling. There's lots of places that fear turns up, and just acknowledging it in that first moment and saying, yes, I am feeling something and I'm feeling fear. That's a great step before we get into what we're going to do about the fear, is just to take that moment of going, yep, I can feel fear coming up, and how it feels.
And sometimes that's safety around horses too, isn't it? You know, like you can feel fear, particularly around horses that are unsuitable. And if you can at least acknowledge it and not try and cover it up, then the problem can be, I suppose it's sort of the next step, identify it. But first of all, you've got to actually acknowledge that there is a bit of fear there.
Yes, and sometimes fear is totally warranted. Horses are dangerous animals at times, and they're big animals and they can be unpredictable. So fear is there to keep us safe. So acknowledging it and understanding it is what we need to do, rather than trying to ignore it or cover it up.
Yep. Okay, so once we've got that we've actually acknowledged the fear, so we're starting off with a positive mindset, acknowledging our strength and accomplishments, then we're going to acknowledge the fear. What's the next one then?
The next thing to do is to determine the source of the fear.
Yep.
And that can be, is it something from the past? Is it something in the present? Or perhaps the future? And I find with horse riders that they often project to the future, possibly coming from a past experience. So when my horse went past this particular part of the arena last week, he shied. So there's the past experience, but they project to the future that it may happen again. So they get fearful about what might happen and what has happened. So determining where this fear is coming from. Is it something that's right now? I mean, is the horse doing something that's scary? Or is it a fear that's really living in the past or living in the future? So just determining where that source of fear is coming from. Is it in this moment?
Yep. Okay, because sometimes if someone's had a problem in the past and they keep thinking about it again and again and again, they're really bringing it into their future, aren't they?
That's right. They bring it to the present and even project forward to this what if this happens. So we call it the what ifs. What if the tiger comes around the corner and scares my horse? Or what if he bucks today? Or so the fear can come from a worry about what's going to happen.
Yep. Okay, the next tip. So we've got the first three. So the next one, number 4.
The next one is once we've decided where this fear is coming from and maybe talk that through a little bit, we have to work out in this moment, is it appropriate right now? Now, what I mean by that is sometimes it is in the present moment. The horse is getting tense, it's getting tight, and we're starting to feel danger looming, and it is something that's going to happen right now. Excuse me. Other times it's something that we think might happen or, like we were saying before, something that has happened before. So it's determining right in that moment, is it happening now? And just getting that sorted out in that moment.
Yes. So someone who's had a fall last week, last month, last year, who's got that fear that it's going to happen, and there might be a whole lot of situations that have changed. They might have had a fall on a previous horse, bad weather, previous situation, the horse might have been fresh, and this time you're saying, is it appropriate right now? Your horse is standing there, he's an absolute angel, he's not doing anything at all. Is that fear appropriate right now?
Yeah.
All right. So once we've established that, what's the next tip?
The next step to take is to make a decision.
Yep.
And that decision is a decision of, can I work with this now? So we've looked at the fear, we've acknowledged it, we've talked about where it's coming from. Is it appropriate now? Is it in the moment? And what we're going to do, we make a decision with whether we're going to work with it or not. And I think you talked about that a little bit earlier. Sometimes we do need to make a decision to not work with it if it's not appropriate. If the horse is really losing it or we're not matched well to the horse, it's no use working through that with that horse in that moment if we can't work through with it. And there are times when we can't, and we don't need to push that. So it's making a decision right now. It's going to be a yes or no decision. Is, am I going to work with it or am I going to do something else? And we'll talk about what the something else is in our next step.
Okay, and I think that's where you need the experienced person, isn't it? You need someone there to help you that's experienced around horses, experienced around working with people who aren't very confident. So you don't want a gung-ho experienced horseman that's just going to say, just get on and kick them and keep going forward if it's something that can't be worked with right now. So this is probably about the time where you just can't do it all yourself. You've got to have someone who's experienced who can help you through this process, probably right from the start, but even the further you go through, the further it has to be that you need someone there to just help you and guide you a little bit.
Yes. And I love that slogan of Nike of just do it.
Yep.
but I don't agree with it 100% because sometimes there are times when it just do it isn't the appropriate response.
Yep.
So my sixth step is, if the answer is no to that question, can I work with it right now? What do you do? What do you do in that moment?
Yep.
So I tell people to celebrate that they made a decision, that they've gone through all those other 5 steps, that they've acknowledged their fear, they've talked about it, and they've really worked out that it isn't something they can work with in this moment, to celebrate it, to back away and to revisit it, and then to take really small steps to revisit what the triggers were and to debrief the situation rather than to avoid it. So what I mean by that is we might need to dismount. We might need to get off the horse in that moment and just take a breath, celebrate and say, look, we made a good decision. But then to debrief and talk about what is the next step we can take in that moment to diffuse. Now, usually for me that will be something on the ground, some sort of groundwork. I wouldn't have the rider just get off, put the horse away and go back home because that's avoidance and that doesn't help the horse or the rider. So I would have them take some steps back. We'd talk about where the fear was coming from. Obviously, it couldn't be worked with in the moment, so something had to change, and what we were going to change in that moment. And usually for me that would be, if I'm needing to get riders dismounted, there'll be something on the ground that we can do to help diffuse the situation. It may be diffusing the rider's own fear by getting them off and doing some breathing and working with the horse on the ground, or it could be something for the horse, removing it from a certain part of the arena, or something that's causing the horse a problem that we need to revisit. But I think the big thing there is the decision is still good. If there's a decision to back away a little bit and not work with it full on, there's still small steps that we can go back to. We're not avoiding. We're not running away from it. We're just debriefing.
Yeah, I think there was 2 things that I really liked about that tip. One was that you said celebrate that you've made a decision. So someone doesn't have to feel bad if they say, no, I can't work with it now. At least they've made a decision and they're not indecisive. They've made a decision, they can't work with it, so let's celebrate that, because now that you've made a decision, we can choose what to do. And I like the fact that you've said, we're not just going to put the horse away, we'll change it, we'll do some groundwork, we'll change something so that we're not going down the path we're originally going. We've made a decision, now we're going to go down this alternate path. So I like both of those. Yeah. All right, what's the next step, number 7?
Yeah. So number 7 really leads into, if we're making a decision at number 5 and we decide we can work with it right now,
yes.
So that's the yes decision, we want to start to gather our tools. So gathering the tools means looking at what's appropriate in the moment to make a change in the fear. Now, usually fear will come up because the rider's either projecting and thinking something's going to happen, so we have to make a change in the rider. That might be breathing. It might be allowing them to come back a pace. It might be allowing them to change a position in the arena. It might be putting them back on the lunge. Could be lots of things, all those tools that we've got. Or it could be for the horse. If the horse is becoming fearful, which is causing the rider to become fearful, we might need to change place, position, pace, any of those things for the horse. So we might need to do some soft yields, or allow the horse to drop back a pace, or take our legs off, or whatever it is. But we need to gather those tools and not just keep pushing through without any thought. We need to gather all our tools in our toolbox.
Yep. All right then. So once we've decided that we've got our tools, what's the next thing?
The next thing is to move closer and stay longer, and then use the idea of approach and retreat. So what I mean by move closer and stay longer is find those little edges, and this plays in a lot to the rider's fear, where they would normally find the edge and either try and push through and become more fearful and more anxious, or retreat so far back from the edge that they avoid it. So we want them to move close to the edge, closer to where they're starting to feel this anxiousness, breathe through it, find some exercises that they can do, but let them sit in it a little bit longer. So my thing that I say to people is, can you do it for 2 more seconds?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And then we go again, can you do it for 2 more seconds? And then there'll be a place where they go, no, I'm starting to need to pull out, and then we allow retreat.
Yep.
So whatever that is that we're working through the fear on, we just sit in it, staying a little bit, moving closer to it, closer to that fear, staying a little bit longer, and then allowing retreat. I find that works exactly the same with horses.
Yeah.
Allowing the horses to move closer, stay longer, and allowing retreat as well with horses.
That whole advanced retreat was the basis for the Jeffrey method, wasn't it? Are you using it because of the Jeffrey method, or that was just another method that you decided to use, the whole advance?
Yeah, not particularly the Jeffrey method, though I've seen a little bit of that. It crops up in a lot of the natural horsemanship teaching.
Yep.
In Pat Pirelli, I've seen it in Monty Roberts. I've seen it in anybody that's working, Ray Hunt, anyone that's working on the ground, Buck Brannaman, all those people where they're doing a little bit of groundwork. They do a lot of approach and retreat first. I
think that you'll find that those people base their methods on the Jeffrey method. I know that Monty said something about the Jeffrey method. We did an interview with him, and I think you'll find that, that whole Jeffrey method, it was... Do you know the story about that?
No, I don't know the full story. I do know it's approach and retreat and pressure release, light pressure released from the neck rope, isn't it?
It's a bit advanced retreat, like you go to sort of think of how close can you get to the horse. You get to the horse's, the edge of where the horse is comfortable or not. You wait there for a moment and then you step back and then you walk up again. And this is just starting off with the walk. So it's just approach. And it's a very similar method, I think, of what you're using here. You're going up to where someone's comfortable but almost uncomfortable. But before they turn away, you back off, and then you go again. If you keep going, you're not going to the same spot. You're going all the time to where they're almost uncomfortable and then back off. But eventually you get closer and closer. And I think that's
right.
Yeah. And that method actually started from someone who didn't have a background with horses. He just saw this young filly up in the yards that people had trouble with and just naturally did that instead of and sort of changed the whole breaking in as such. Just gave the horse a little bit of a say. Yeah. Anyway, that was sort of going a bit sideways there, but sorry about that.
Yes, but I think it is that intuition. It's intuitive about the energy and the space, and that's the same with our own fear in our mind. Coming closer to it, sitting in it a little, and then retreating away so that we can slowly push out and stay a little bit longer.
Yeah. Anyway, that was number 8. What have we got for number 9?
Number 9, this is one I use all the time, is what helps with fear, particularly when the fear has come from something in the past or something we're projecting to the future, is to stay in the moment.
Okay. Yep.
And absolutely in the moment. So I use talking. I talk a lot to people as they're going around, ask them about their last great ride, get them to visualise, get them talking a lot about how it felt on their last great ride. If it's appropriate and they like to do it, we sing. I'm a terrible singer, but I sing a lot in the arena. And we also talk a lot about the breathing because the breath is us in this moment. So if we take attention to the breath and have the breath long and slow and take a lot of attention to the breath, that brings us back into the present. So it really helps people who tend to worry about what if the horse is going to do something. If we can keep them very present with talking, singing, breathing, we can really help them to wash through those feelings of apprehension of what might happen.
Yep. you talked about asking them about the last great ride. So that's really, again, bringing in the positive experiences. So they're thinking about positive experiences rather than the negative. So again, it's going back and changing that mindset of fear into remembering something positive. I think that's really good.
And a thought is energy. So the more we can bring the thoughts to positive, it isn't just about feeling happy and feeling good. It actually does something physiologically. So a thought is energy. So we keep bringing back into positive thought, puts a certain energy into the body, which also translates to a horse. So that can help us as well.
Okay, good.
Last step. My last one is to be kind to yourself and allow yourself to take small steps and to celebrate along the way, to always assess and see where you're at today and take the pressure down a little bit. So I like John Farnham's song, Take the Pressure Down, because I feel it rising like a storm. And for horses, that's how it is for them. If we're not working on taking the pressure down, taking the pressure off ourselves, and working on these little fears and little anxieties and tension that we hold, for the horse it builds up like a storm. And we keep feeding back to them. And it can feed both ways. The horse that builds up like a storm can feed back to us as well. So we've got to have this two-way loop of helping horses with their fears and helping us with our fears as well. So it's very much an awareness about what's happening in that loop, rider to horse, horse to rider, taking lots and lots of small steps, but most importantly, being really kind to yourself and allowing yourself to work through it rather than say, oh, I'm silly, I shouldn't be scared, I used to be better than this. All of those words just don't help.
All right, and I just want to go over those 10 tips to make sure that I've got them right. The first one is to start off positive and acknowledge strengths and accomplishments. Is that right? Thinking about positive mindset, and you talked a little bit about visualization as well.
That's right. So, and acknowledging what you have done already, because we've all done something.
Yep.
So even if you're unable to trail ride out your front gate, you can pick all your horse's feet up and groom him.
Yes. Okay.
Because we can minimise those things and say, oh, that's nothing.
Yep.
But to someone who can't pick their horse's feet up and groom him, that's a lot.
Yes.
So there's always something to acknowledge.
Yep. All right, the next one was also acknowledging the fear and saying I acknowledge the fear and thinking about safety around horses and just recognising that when there is fear there, it should be acknowledged.
Yeah. And where do you feel it?
Yes. I think that's good. Yeah, because everyone's going to feel a bit different, aren't they?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, the next one, which was number 3, was determining the source of the fear, and is it past or present or perhaps future?
Yeah, just taking a moment there and chatting about it with your instructor is good because they can help you talk through that a little bit and say, well, particularly if it's past or future, they can point out that in this moment it's quite different.
Okay. All right, the number 4 then is it appropriate right now, or is it something, we talked about it could be something that's in the past, might have been with a previous horse, previous situation, previous everything else, may not even be appropriate right now, but just talking about that and acknowledging it and working it out. That was number 4.
Yeah, that's number 4,
All right, number 5 is making a decision. So we can go with yes or we can go with no. But either way, we've got to make a decision. We can't just sit here on number 5. We've got to decide then yes or no.
And I think making a decision, that's action as well. So fear can really grip us and turn us into inaction.
It paralyses us, doesn't it?
Paralyses. That's the word I was looking for. So making a decision is an action. So that's an important step.
Okay. So if the answer is no, because sometimes it is, this is number 6 we're talking about now. If the answer is no, we still should celebrate that a decision's been made from number 5 And then just because the answer is no doesn't mean we've got to stop. It just means that we change the exercise and maybe do some groundwork or, whatever.
Yep. Just to debrief it rather than avoid it.
Yep. Then number 7, and that's if the answer is yes, we've got to gather our tools. So gather our tools, and you talk about having the tools, but just changing things. Changing, maybe it might be where we're working in the arena, it might be changing the rider's position or their pace or whatever they're doing, but making some changes within those tools.
Yes.
That was number 7.
Yep.
All right. And then with number 8, you talked about moving closer, staying longer, and retreating. We talked about some of the great horsemen that use that method when they're training horses, but you've changed this around to working with fear around horses. So you're sort of using a similar technique, but using it for people to help them gain confidence. Yeah, so that was number 8.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to say about that?
Yes, I think it's exactly the same. In my book, I call it the comfort model, and it's just a model of a comfort circle in the middle. The next ring out is where you're feeling uncomfortable, but it's sort of like a learning zone where we all feel a little uncomfortable. And then there's the outer ring, which is where fear really grips us, or we become really confused, or I call that the wild zone, where our brains just leave us. And it's a wild zone for horses as well. In that zone, nobody can learn anything. So we do need to move closer into the uneasy zone a little bit and retreat back to comfort often. And that will make the comfort zone bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yep.
And, that's used in all sorts of sports training.
Sure.
It's used in all sorts of business training as well. So we just bring that into our horse world as well and build our comfort zones and our horses' comfort zones bigger.
Yep. All right. And then number 9 was staying present, talking, singing, breathing. And you talk particularly, about keeping someone in the moment, but asking them about the latest great ride and having some positive experiences there.
Yes. I think if I can just keep someone talking a little, or even having a little hum or a sing, or putting awareness to their breath, if we can keep them in the present moment, really does help with fear. And it just helps with the general ride as well, because we're aware of what's happening underneath us.
Yep.
There's so many technical things that we think of as riders. If we get too much into our head, thinking about all the things we should be doing, it takes us away from the awareness and that present moment that the horse needs. The horse needs us to be exactly here in this moment.
Okay. And then number 10, you talked about being kind to yourself, taking small steps and celebrating. And you also talked about the John Farnham song, pressure down. We want to take the pressure off ourselves. Yeah.
That's right. When I talk to a lot of people around horses, they really do get quite down on themselves about feeling fearful. I think it can make them feel like they're not good at it. I'm not a good rider, or I'm not a good horse person, or I used to be able to do this. And as soon as they get into that spiral, it's difficult for them to move forward. So we really do need to be kind to ourselves and kind to everybody else around us that's experiencing it, because our peer group can either build us up or bring us down very quickly.
Yeah. And I think the big thing too, Fran, is that not everyone can get to the Olympics. Just to go out to have a horse, to enjoy their company, to do things with them, there's a lot of benefits in that.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And the way we enjoy horses is different between person to person. There's no better way to enjoy a horse. Yeah. It's not better to be an Olympian than it is to go for a trail ride.
No, it's just different.
So it's just different. So the way that we enjoy our horses is different, and we need to celebrate that.
Yep. All right. Now, Fran, you use this formula in your fear-busting clinics, is that right? So you often use this same formula and same thing, same steps for working with fear around horses.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Look, it's been great talking to you. I think if people do want to go back and find out a bit more about your fear-busting clinics, what's the best way to contact you? And before I ask you, the details will be on your page, which I did we go Frances Griffen last time or Fran Griffen? I can't remember.
I think we went Fran Griffen. Most people call me Fran.
So I think
my mother calls Frances.
Oh, okay. We don't want to be your mother. We'll keep that for her. But I think if you go to horsechats.com, and this one, because you've been here before, might be on Fran Griffith too. But I think if you go to horsechats.com and search for Fran, you'll find both episodes anyway. But Fran, in case people are ready now, what's your phone number and contact details?
The phone number is 0249886031 and the email is hnhcentre@gmail.com.
Okay.
And that just stands for Hunter Natural Horsemanship Centre.
And just two things there. Just because you've given Australian details, there should be a +61 in front of that too. Knock out the 0. So it'd be +61 249 886031. And the centre would be spelled. Do you want to just spell that?
Yeah. HNH Centre spelled CENTRE.
Great. At gmail.com. Yep. All right, Fran, thanks very much for your time today. And I'm sure people will get a lot out of that. And we'd love to have you back again sometime soon to talk about another subject in a bit more detail.
Great. Thank you, Glenys. Thanks for having me.
That's okay. Bye.
Bye.
Remember that our comments and instructions are general in nature and do not take into consideration your individual horses or your individual ability and circumstances. If you enjoyed this podcast, then please leave your comment below.